So, this reading on giving is taken from the Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Then said a rich man, "Speak to us of giving." And he answered, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. For what are possessions but things you keep and guard for fear you may need them tomorrow? And tomorrow? What shall tomorrow bring to the overprudent dog burying bones in the trackless sand as he follows the pilgrims to the holy city? And what is fear of need but need itself? Is not dread of thirst when your well is full, the thirst that is unquenchable? There are those who give little of the much which they have, and they give it for recognition, and their hidden desire makes their gifts unwholesome. And there are those who have little and give it all. These are the believers in life, and the bounty of life, and their coffer is never empty. There are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. It is well to give when asked, but it is better to give unasked. For though understanding. And to the open-handed, the search for one who shall receive is joy greater than giving. And who are you that men should rend their bosom and unveil their pride, that you may see their worth naked and their pride unabashed? You often say, "I would give, but only to the deserving." The trees in your orchard say, "Not so," nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. See first that you yourself deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving.
I always pick my sermon topics months in advance. And sometimes they hit the nail on the head for what time of year it is or something that happened in the news. And sometimes they don't. I think today, if I'd known somehow in my consciousness that Marion would die today, I would have preached my lamentation sermon. Because when we lose someone that's made a big difference, it hurts. It's sad. And our natural feeling is to want to lament and be sad. And what I'm saying is that once the sadness abates a tiny bit, it's important to live and keep living, even in the midst of that grief. And how do we do that? It's not an easy question to answer, is it? Because when you feel depleted or like you don't have enough resources, or you're worried or fearful, it's much easier to want to hide or just stay in bed on a rainy day or not get out. But the thing is that giving actually multiplies. It doesn't mean giving money necessarily. All kinds of giving actually multiplies our sense of living. So I invite you to go ahead and come into this theme and think about what really makes a church sustainable. It's people, and it's the generosity of those people, the time, sharing experience, sharing gifts of all kinds. So generosity is not simply an act of stewardship. It's not simply an act of planned giving. But it is a spiritual practice that transforms both the giver and the receiver. And it makes our congregation a breathing, living entity. Let's begin by thinking about a truth that we often witness in the world around us. Hoarding and greed stifle growth. Lack of generosity is rooted in fear of scarcity, of not having enough, of running out. It gives the impression that safety lies in an accumulation. But as Alberto Rios reminds us in our opening words, giving what we have and clinging too tightly to what we have does not make us richer, it actually isolates us. Imagine a garden where each plant hoards the sunlight and soil for itself alone. What would happen? The garden would wither. The very ecosystem would die. It would collapse. Hoarding cuts us off from the flow of life. Only when we release, only when we share, can the ecosystem flourish. Just as in the intergenerational message this morning, my attempt at retelling Chicken Little, when we get caught up in the fear of the world, about what might happen, we can often get stuck in a scarcity of thinking that can keep us running around trying to figure out what to do, just like Chicken Little. Fear of the future, operating like the sky is falling, can leave you empty and alone, and in the original story, eaten by a fox. On the other hand, generosity, even sharing our true feelings about life, giving of ourselves, creates an endless supply of abundance that can only be unlocked when we open our hands and our hearts to each other. Khalil Gibran writes, if you give but little when you give of your possessions, you give but little when you give of your possessions, but it's when you give of yourself that you truly give. These words invite us to move beyond transactional generosity, which is giving and expecting something in return, into a transformational generosity where just giving of yourself becomes an act of love. Consider the tiny seed. When you plant it, you give it away, but you can't hoard a seed. You can't keep it in the closet and expect it to grow. You have to plant it. You must nourish it with soil and with water and light. And you can't demand that it bears fruit immediately. You have to wait, and over time, it grows into something more significant than you initially gave to it. This is precisely how generosity works. It multiplies in ways we can't even imagine or plan for. Generosity is not a mere social virtue. It is a spiritual practice. When we give, we expand the boundaries of ourself. We step into a deeper understanding that we are all interconnected. When you hoard all your earthly belongings and earthly possessions and keep them to yourself, you create a poverty of tenuous connections. Giving allows us to experience a kind of liberation. We loosen our grip on fear and scarcity. When generosity is expressed in its purest and most selfless form, It can provoke an unexpected, persnickety response in people. Sometimes acts of great kindness leave people overwhelmed and they cannot adequately express gratitude. For example, when I was about 16, I worked several summers to buy my mother a round table for her kitchen. It's a round table I still have. And on her birthday, I had it delivered and I put her favorite flowers on it, daisies. And she came home from work and she put her purse on it and she walked right by and didn't even see it until I started crying and I said, "Hey, didn't you even notice?" But she had imagined that table there for so long and wanted it so much she didn't even see it when she walked in the door. And sometimes when we give, it's like that. The person isn't just being unkind. They just don't see what you do because they needed it so much. Sometimes we do things for people and they just can't see it because the need is so great. Often when I sit next to someone or a family, when someone is dying, they forget that I was even there. In fact, I've had parishioners tell other people I didn't come when I've spent days with them by their bedside. Sometimes I'm there for someone in such a profound way that they can find no words to express appreciation, so their natural response is to just avoid me, not look at me. This happens so often that I've learned that it's actually pretty normal. And I would never want to stop being a helper, so I just pretend like nothing's transpired between us. I don't even correct the people who say I wasn't there when I was there, because I want to keep the relationship moving forward. One perfect example of this was when Jenny and I were getting married. My sister wanted to offer a day of service because we were both helpers and she thought that would be better than a real engagement party. And so I started thinking that since I'd moved into the parsonage in 2007, I'd been digging up all the bricks behind the parsonage because they were just mangled in roots and it was a mess. And so I was digging up the bricks thinking someday we'll put in a patio. And I thought, well, maybe our day of service could be a brick bash, and we could raise the money to have it properly excavated, and then our friends could come over and help us lay the bricks as our engagement party. So I wrote to the parish committee and I said, do you mind if I raise some money for the patio to be properly excavated at the back of the parsonage? And I got a letter back from the parish committee that said, Yes, I could raise money and ask my friends and family for this, but I needed to let them know that I couldn't take the patio with me when I left. I took the letter to the parish committee and I said, sometimes when people do something really nice for you, you just say thank you. Inability to express appreciation adequately arises because some acts of generosity often touch people on a deep and personal level, far beyond what they expect or feel they deserve. The sheer magnitude of a giver's thoughtfulness can evoke feelings of vulnerability and of humility, or even discomfort. As the recipient grapples with how to reciprocate or respond, in these moments, words are actually inefficient. And awkwardness or silence often takes their place. Not out of ingratitude, but because the recipient is having difficulty processing the depth of the kindness shown. Transformative generosity requires us not just things, but our time, our attention, our compassion, our presence. It means giving of ourselves even when there's no promise of reciprocation. In fact, giving without any expectation of reciprocation. This kind of generosity grows relationships, communities, and even our souls. As Ralph Waldo Emerson stated in our centering thought, generosity is the true gift, and generosity alone is enlivening. Learning not to expect gratitude or appreciation is part of being generous, a generous, cheerful giver. The spiritual practice of generosity also reminds us to be open to receiving. Just as we grow by giving, we also grow by allowing others to be generous towards us. Receiving with grace, acknowledging our shared humanity, deepens the bonds of community. How might you practice generosity in your life? Perhaps you can give something tangible, food, to a neighbor, or donating to a cause, or you could give your time. Offer a listening ear without distraction to a friend. As we practice generosity, let us remember that what we give, whether small or large, matters. Every act of generosity, no matter how seemingly insignificant, contributes to the greater flourishing of life and love, and helps us grow individually and collectively. What seed of generosity might you plant in the life of another person this week, knowing that its fruit will someday nourish them, and perhaps even nourish someone else you don't even know? Could you write a letter, make a phone call, help shovel slush, or make a cup of tea? There are infinite ways to express generosity. To be honest, I don't really think the world is a generous place. In fact, every day in the news, I start thinking it's less and less generous. But that does not make me want to stop being generous. I want to be a generous person. I want to laugh and smile and show kindness everywhere I go. Let us be the ones who are known for our generous spirits, because generosity grows kindness in our world, in this world of scarcity and hard-heartedness. And maybe someday, if enough people decide to be generous, all that hard-heartedness in the world will lose its sway. Let's love the hell out of the world.